Well, okay, human beings are watching those dominance hierarchies since we became self-aware, thinking, what the hell are we up to? What the hell are we up to? And there's a question that lurks in there. What constitutes acceptable power? What constitutes acceptable sovereignty? Who should lead? Who should rule? What should be at the top? Well, we talked about that. The Mesopotamians figured that out. Speech and vision, that's Marduk. Speech, vision, and the willingness to confront the terrible unknown. That's what should rule. Well, what? Is that an arbitrary idea, or is that a great idea? How could it be any other way? Well, that's what human beings are like. And I don't think that you can read the Mesopotamian story and understand the reference, which isn't an easy thing to do, and fail to draw that conclusion. Marduk has eyes all the way around his head. He speaks magic words. He goes off to fight Tiamat, the dragon of chaos. Well, what's that? That's the reptilian predator that lurks in the unknown. Well, is any of that, is there anything about any of that that stands in opposition to what you would presume if you were just analyzing our situation from a purely biological perspective? We're prey animals, we're predators. We've been threatened by reptiles forever. Why wouldn't we use the predator that lurks in the dark forest or the water as a representative of the unknown? Why wouldn't we harness that circuitry? We already have it at hand, and even more to the point, how could we do anything else? It makes perfect sense. Well, so then you might say, well, what would you want to be king? You could say king of the world or king of your own soul. What do you want to subordinate yourself to? How about your heroic willingness to encounter the unknown and articulate it and share that with people? There's no nobler vision than that. And I don't see that it's merely arbitrary. And it's not merely arbitrary too, because if you do that, to the degree that you do that, assuming your society isn't entirely corrupt, you will be successful. It will actually aid you practically. You'll rise up above men. You'll be selected by women. You'll be admirable. You'll be valued. And you know that because if you look at the people that you admire and value, again, unless you've taken a detour into dark places and are possessed with admiration for people who are working for malevolent purposes and for destruction, you just have to watch the people that you admire and try to figure out what's common across them and draw your own conclusions. And you can ask yourself too, when you're torturing yourself with your conscience because you're not doing what you should be and you know it, what is it that you're torturing yourself in relationship to? You have a vision of your own ideal and you torment yourself if you're not matching it. What's the ideal? Well, you don't know, right? It's kind of incoherent and poorly articulated, but that doesn't mean it isn't trying to manifest itself and make itself known to you. It's really the purpose of religious education, is to make that ideal articulated. Well, we've lost that. It's not a good thing. Okay, so I talked to you about the Mesopotamian story. And I talked to you about the Egyptian story and what I thought it meant. And it's a bit of an elaboration on the same theme because it says, well, the hero isn't only the deity, the transcendent pattern, let's say, that goes out into the unknown, cuts it into pieces, and makes the world. That's not good enough because it only deals with the terrible mother. That's one way of thinking about it. But there's a terrible father too, once culture gets instantiated in large scale. And the Egyptians had that problem. Two problems. Chaos, second problem, pathological order. Well, structures tend towards pathological order. The Egyptians laid out why. That's Seth, right? Seth is the evil advisor of the king who's lurking in the background all the time, trying to tear the structure down for his own malevolent purposes. So now and then that overcomes the structure and destroys rigidifies and makes malevolent the entire social structure. So it degenerates into, say, fascist totalitarianism, something like that. And that's been a threat since we've had highly organized societies. Then the hero ends up in the underworld and has to come back and do direct combat with that malevolent force at the price of his own consciousness, right? Because Horus gets one of his eyes destroyed. It's no bloody joke to face the forces that make a culture rigid and malevolent. What's at the top? Because that's the ideal. That's the eye at the top of the pyramid, or the golden Buddha in the lotus. It's the same thing. It's the same thing as the crucifix, paradoxically enough. And that has to do, it has to do with something like the voluntary acceptance and therefore transcendence of suffering. It's something like that. These are not arbitrary ideas. They're deeply, that's my case anyways, they're deeply, deeply, deeply rooted in biology and culture. They're as deeply rooted in biology as the dominance hierarchy is rooted in biology. And we already know the answer to that. The dominance hierarchy has been around for 350 million years. It's a long time. You don't get to just brush that off and say, well, morality is some sort of second order cognitive problem. It's like, no, it's not. I mean, I can tell you something about its instantiation in your nervous system. You have a counter at the bottom of your brain that keeps track of where you are in terms of your status. And it bloody well regulates the sensitivity of your emotions. So if you're at the bottom of the hierarchy, barely clinging on to the world, everything overwhelms you. And that's because you're damn near dead. And so everything should overwhelm you. You've got no extra resources. Any more threat, you're sunk. So you become extremely sensitive to negative emotion and maybe also impulsive so that you grab while the grabbing's good. And if you're nearer the top in the dominance hierarchy and your counter tells you that, then your serotonin levels go up, you're less sensitive to negative emotion, you're less impulsive, you live longer, like everything works in your favor. Your immune system functions better and you're oriented at least to some degree towards the medium and long-term future.